Welcome to the Modern Arizona podcast. Today's podcast is a little different. It's from one of our live events with the Modern Divorce Navigator, designed to make divorce less stressful and more manageable. If you enjoy the podcast, don't forget to subscribe. And if you're curious about the Navigator, check out the link in the description. We would love to have you join us. Now let's dive back into the episode. Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Billie Tarasio, and we are doing a special live event for the Modern Divorce podcast here with Maleah Woodward, lawyer at Modern Law, former CASA, adoptive mom to 2 autistic kiddos. And today we're going to be talking about divorce and family court when you have autism involved. And that could mean that the client has autism, which can be a real challenge for if the kids have autism. Now, if a parent has autism, we do a lot of coaching with our clients and we talk about how you're presenting yourself, right? And the impression that you're making. And it feels like an awfully steep ask for a client who's got autism.
Yes, it is. To not quite change who you are, but to highlight your strengths is hard to do, especially on the witness stand when you're already anxious as it is. And that's usually when autism is, as I call it, shining, because the more you're feeling emotions, your autism symptoms and signs become much more. So one of the things I do with my clients is I will try to settle as often as possible. But when I do have those times where I have to put them on the witness stand, I make sure and build that relationship where they have confidence in me that I'm going to lead them, not in inappropriate leading question kind of ways, but I'm going to lead them to tell their story in a way that the judge is going to hear and see them for who they are. And so sometimes if they're going to be on the stand, there's a lot more time that I involve in preparing them to be on that stand.
Well, that certainly makes sense that you would want to spend some time on it. How do you handle it in terms of the judge? Have you ever seen a judge discriminate against an autistic parent, or their ex is really throwing in their face their autism as a reason they shouldn't have parenting time or custody?
I have not seen it happen yet, but I'm sure that there are judges out there that may do that. Fortunately, the cases so far that I've had where I've had a parent who's autistic, I've had the connection of a judge down in that area that also has an autistic child. And so I have attempted to encourage conversations with this judge to help the judge that's over my case understand what it means to have an autistic child and to be autistic.
So you're advocating really in the judiciary and in the whole legal industry for people to understand the impacts.
Yes. Yeah.
Good for you. That's so exciting.
Thank you.
And are you finding people are more open to this?
Yes, as long as I'm coming at it from an approach of not shoving it down their throats. Coming at it from a perspective of let's have a conversation. What does this really look like? How does this benefit the child? And acknowledging that there are pitfalls to being a parent with autism, or potential pitfalls. And as long as I'm acknowledging those things, I think the judges are more willing to listen to me.
I think you're exactly right. No matter what the complication is, no matter what complication you have as a parent, kind of getting out in front of it and framing it yourself and not allowing it to be framed by the opposing counsel or by the judge themselves is the best practice, regardless. Right. So how do you frame that disability in a way that is most beneficial to the clients?
I think one of the ways that I frame that, for, again, looking at it being the parent that is dealing with autism, is I highlight what are the things that they are strong about. The fact that for certain people with autism, communicating about emotions is not necessarily their strength, but being organized or being routine or being able to have fun with various activities that little kids would enjoy. Think of like building something and watching it work the way it's supposed to, or various things like that. So I use those to highlight, this is how it's going to benefit the child. This is, I may spend more time on some of the factors that we usually just brush over when I talk about what's your relationship with the child. I may have the parent dig into that a little bit more of, well, what do you do for fun with your child? What or how do you manage the routine and ensure that they get to school on time, and different things like that that really highlight, hey, they are doing this. The other thing that I highlight for some parents is their support system. And so that's another factor that often just kind of gets quickly, couple sentences. I may dig into that a little bit more and say, who do you have? How often do you have contact with them? What kind of support do they give you? So that the judge knows, okay, this is not a 2-year-old that I'm leaving with a person that there are some concerns. They have family and friends that are coming over pretty frequently and consistently that can be there to support that child as well.
I think that's a really good idea. Whenever you've got a parent, regardless of what they're struggling with, to highlight what is the support network and what are the safeguards? What are the safety nets? Like, judge, you don't need to put a safety net in place. It's already there. Can be a very effective strategy, whether we're talking about alcohol, mental illness, physical disabilities, regardless, being able to have a very proactive plan, I think helps. And then you talked about how some autistic parents struggle maybe emotionally, but if they have those other relationships and they're making sure that those emotional needs are being taken care of, I feel like you can do a lot of damage control or potential damage control.
Right. Exactly. Autism often has a very emotional aspect to it. And an autistic adult they have some insight, but their insight may not be as, it may be more concrete. And so they understand, hey, I can't get angry. This is what happens when I get angry, but they need some very concrete tools in place. And so I'm also asking questions for my information about what treatment they've been through, what skills have they learned. That may not be information that I necessarily highlight to the judge, but it helps me to hear them say, here's the skills that I've worked on to address some of these things, and here's the tools that I use. And again, sometimes I'll highlight for the judge and sometimes I won't. It depends on the client.
This comes up a lot in cases, switching from parents to children, when there are children in the home who have autism. And maybe it's not our client's child, or it's not, it's a stepchild, or it's an older sibling. This comes up a lot. And the older autistic child is many times accused of or has been abusive to the
Mm-hmm.
younger siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And you've probably seen this in your work as a CASA as well. How does that, first, why is that happening?
So first, why that's happening. So I can speak from experience on this. I have 2 autistic children myself, and my son is more prone to the emotional outbursts. And not that my daughter doesn't have outbursts, but her outbursts are more tears, and my son's outbursts are more physical. I have been hit, I have been punched, I have been kicked, I have been bit. And my
Mm,
daughter has experienced all those things as a result of my son's outbursts.
yeah.
And there's a belief in the research of autism that it's not that a child doesn't feel emotions, it's that they feel them so intensely
Mm-hmm.
that they don't know how to manage that. And they also can't identify, there's a dysregulation of being able to identify, this is what's going on in my body emotionally. So it does look like abuse, but I think educating the people about the child that
Mm-hmm.
is dealing with autism and what that looks like, and understanding that this is not, when they're in that moment, I almost remove my child from the equation and say, this is not my son. This is my son dealing with autism. And that's when I say the autism is shining. It's there and it's very present. And so I don't deal with him like a typical 7-year-old. I deal with the autism first, and then I deal with, okay, now let's talk about what led to the outburst, because that I can deal with as I would a typical 7-year-old. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's one of the things I try and work with parents on, is in my previous career, not so much now as an attorney, because I don't have time to, and I'm not sure they wanted me billing for that, but I try and dig into and help them understand, this is what this looks like, and this is what this means. You have to let go that they're actually trying to hurt you, because they're not. They're trying to express something, and you just got to figure out how to help them.
Yeah, this is awfully complicated, right? So you had not been able to protect yourself or your daughter from all of the effects of your son's autism. I think that that is very common, right? I don't know
Yep.
that in a family, if you have an autistic child who happens to swing violent and ragey, that you can protect all the family from those impacts. And you can certainly see how that could become an issue in family court.
Yes.
How do you suggest people deal with that?
So one of the things that I look at, I mean, for myself is I have a team around
Mhm,
my children.
mhm,
My children are in all the services that they could possibly be in order to get the support that they need, because I can't do it on my own. First and foremost, I can't. And second, as much as I have experience and training that should help me, I'm still a mom and I'm still human. So I'm prone to a short fuse. So I need people. And so I have therapists and um, behavior techs that are in my home 4 days a week to help my children and to help us function as a family and help my son and my daughter, but particularly my son whose autism is more rageful, to help him learn and understand what's going on so that the outbursts reduce.
The other thing that has come up many, many times in cases are allegations of sexual abuse by an autistic teenager.
Yeah. So I'm not sure that that's necessary. There's not necessarily a correlation, and I think that's hard to really connect and say, well, this must be what's going on, and this is why. First of First of all, there are certain boundaries that you have to establish when they're young. Does sexual abuse happen? Yes, it does. I dealt with that in my previous career. But is it necessarily that autistic children will cause that to happen? No, not necessarily. There's other things potentially going on, or there's a misunderstanding of boundaries that needs
Mhm,
to be directed. If
mhm,
that's happening, one
mhm,
of the things I will always advise my clients is safety first. And the best thing you can do for both the person that is making the allegation and the child that is alleged is to protect them, which
mhm.
means you gotta let the process work through. You've gotta let an investigation happen, because that's the best thing you can do for the child that is making the allegation. And that's also gonna help the child that is alleged, but keeping that safety between them so that there's protections is your best thing. And then any treatment that can be put in place to help both kids is going to be positive.
And in your previous career as a mental health therapist, you worked with families that experienced, there's a name for this.
I worked with children, or I worked with youth who had committed a sex offense.
Okay. And is there a special name for that when it's inside a household or siblings?
It usually, they either call that just incest or interfamilial sexual abuse.
And have you seen families be able to recover from this?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
that's really good to know because it comes up a lot in our cases. A lot of our clients have allegations or confirmation of sexual abuse or sexual misconduct. It's hard to know what the difference is a little bit between misconduct and abuse. You know, we often think of abuse as really about power and control, and especially when you're dealing with an autistic kid or children that are close in age, it may be more like just misconduct, like poor judgment, bad
Right,
boundaries, like just, you know,
right.
kids don't always make good choices, and autistic kids or kids on the spectrum or kids with any sort of differences tend to make worse choices.
Right. So I think for as far as treatment and things like that go, one of the things I know, and there's a lot of research that backs this up,
Mhm,
is the recidivism rate, meaning the
mhm,
rate of doing it again, is
mhm,
extremely low for youth who get help. So who enter into therapy, compared to the recidivism rate for adult sexual offenders is extremely high. So it's very encouraging, because one of the reasons that that's true is because youth, they're exploring the world. They're figuring out who the heck they are. I always used to describe it as they're trying on lots of different hats, figuring out, am I this person? Am I, moody? Am I an engineer? What am I? Who am I? And so, and it's the same with sexuality. Unfortunately, the youth who commit a sex offense choose to explore in very not appropriate ways. And so as a society, we really should be wrapping around those kids and giving them more services because we know the recidivism rate is just so extremely low. So,
right. If we can fix this behavior earlier, we're all going to be safer and happier and healthier.
right. And so that's one of the reasons I say for the child, for the child who's having allegations made against them, treatment, get them into treatment. For the child who's making the allegations or the victim, holding the offender accountable and believing them is the best treatment or the best thing you can do starting off in their healing and their making progress and moving forward.
Sure. And making sense of like what happened to me and is it okay and is it not okay and what's my role? And yeah, I mean, the best way to is, I guess, transparency and accountability.
Right.
But let's talk about parenting plans with children who are autistic. Obviously, there's a huge range of what autism can look like, and it's becoming, it looks like, broader and broader in definition.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So I've thought about this quite a bit, particularly with my own children. What would that look like if I had someone I had to exchange parenting time with? But then I took the next step and I asked my friend who is a judge who has an autistic child as well. And I said, if there was one thing about parenting plans, what would you change? And he told me, and it was exactly what I thought, which is that I would have a significant reduction in transitions for that child. Because if you think about the different plans that they use in Arizona, 223 plan or the 5 plan, that's too much. That's too much for, I mean, even just a neurotypical child, a child dealing with autism, that there's not enough time for them to adjust to the new household and figure things out. So for me, a child with autism, I am advocating for at minimum week on, week off.
Okay.
Because that's enough time for them to settle back into the house.
Okay. And do you know families with autistic children who successfully do equal parenting time?
I have not met them yet. No.
Okay.
It's rough. It's really, really rough.
I can understand this for a lot of reasons. On one hand, parenting children with autism or any sort of developmental disability, anything, is harder. So it takes a higher quality of parenting, and you're not going to have two parents who have the same parenting abilities.
Right.
Now, normally judges are like, doesn't matter, deal with it, figure it out. But when you've got somebody who's got really special needs, how is it that you can convince a judge, no, judge, this is different?
So I think one of the things that I look to when was the child diagnosed? If this was something that was diagnosed during the marriage, then I'm going to push the other parent, because typically in a divorce setting, one parent suddenly takes the stance of, well, I don't really believe that they have autism.
Always.
Right.
Every time.
Every time. One of the parents inevitably comes out and is like, well, I never really believed that in the first place. I just let you do it, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
So I will look to see, well, when was the child evaluated? And so I'll use that to be like, how suddenly are you saying this child doesn't have autism when you've gone this many years with diagnoses and data backing up what is being said? And I think the other part too is that's when I will also use that information to try and push for an unequal parenting plan, because I know that if that non-believing parent continues to push that agenda, they're not going to allow services in their home.
I would love to get your opinion on this. What I said is my number one thing when I'm working with a family with a neurodivergent child, if it's high conflict, is for somebody to have final decision making. Because I've seen joint weaponized against the more proactive parent time and time again.
Okay.
But what are your thoughts?
Yes, I would say final say, or at minimum that the parties agree that they will follow the recommendations of the pediatrician or therapist who is recommending services, and that both parties will allow services and ensure the child attends. So, because sometimes services come to their
Oh, that's totally true.
sometimes they don't.
No, you're right. In the parenting plan, it should talk about therapies, getting the kids to therapy. If you're unable to get the kid to therapy during your parenting time, that you will let the other parent know XYZ, time in advance and give them the opportunity. That I think is absolutely crucial. That's good stuff. What else do you like in parenting plans?
I think also an acknowledgement of the fact that the child deals with autism and how they will handle when a safety issue comes into play.
Mm.
So,
Okay.
for example, I'm thinking again, my children. As my children get older, if it becomes very apparent that my son, who is really solid, is going to be able to injure my daughter, then I don't want her. I want some kind of plan in place where she can go, that she can be safe while I'm attempting to help my son de escalate. So, some kind of plan that says, hey, this is what we're going to do to handle this, that doesn't punish our other child, but also doesn't punish the child who is dealing with the autism.
Right, right. So I hadn't thought about safety planning within a parent. This is like one of the hardest situations for families when they do split up is how do we continue to take care of our high needs child?
Mhm.
And how do we work together? Because you need all the resources you can get. You need all the people you can get. You need as many people who love this child and can be there because everybody needs more support, right? Both
Right.
parents, both kids. So I hadn't thought about like, what does a safety plan look like? You know, in the event that somebody is having a meltdown, this is what we're due, and the other parent will try to do X, Y, and Z. Do you think that that should go in a parenting plan, or is that just a better, like, do it best practice in the moment?
I think it depends because I feel like it has potential to, the safety issue has potential to be weaponized and say, well,
Uh-huh.
you're placing our child at risk by allowing this to happen. And clearly you're not, just think of all the scenarios and all the mud that can be flung. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think having a safety plan, even if it's an addendum or referred to, that the parties agree
Mm-hmm.
to follow the safety
Mm-hmm.
plan created with
Mm-hmm.
therapist so and so, then at least it acknowledges that, hey, we both acknowledge that there are potential safety concerns. And so it removes or reduces that ability to weaponize the behaviors later on and use CPS or whatever, which, I mean, let's be honest, that is any parent's biggest fear, myself included, with high needs children, because somebody could misconstrue something so easily going on in my home.
And you're not going to get it right 100% of the time.
Right.
It's going to be messy. You know, my oldest, who is now almost 21, man, was he hard. He was so hard. And I did the very, very best I could and got all the resources I possibly could. But did I do it right 100% of the time? No, I'm positive I didn't.
No, there are definitely days I was sitting in therapy with my children. Fortunately, their services come to my home. So we were sitting at the dinner table, and my son had been having a great day. And then I come down to dinner, and all of a sudden it's a nightmare. And I look at the therapist and I said, is it me? Is it me? And she looked back at me and she said, it might be today. And I was like,
Oh,
thank you. I'm a bad mom today.
it's so hard. And you're also having to make choices about medication, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that that comes into play when you've got neurodivergence and kids who are really
Mhm.
struggling, especially if they've got complex behavioral or super emotional needs. You're going to be trying medications.
Yeah.
Those could have side effects. Those could be making things worse or less bad. And trying to figure that out while also coordinating between households
Right. Right.
means you have so many more variables.
Right. Which is one of the reasons that I always try to make sure that to get both parties on the same page in particular to this child. If I can get an agreement between them, then both of them have buy-in for this child compared to if I have to take it to court and I have to shove it down the other person's throat. Now, don't get me wrong, I will if I need to, but
Right.
I'd much rather prefer, it is better for that child and better
Right.
for the parenting long term for a high
Yeah.
needs child to have agreement and buy-in from both parents.
So often the dynamic is usually mom is in mama bear mode and out there advocating and full time trying to get resources. And then it becomes a control thing and a power struggle between mom and dad. And then mom pushes harder. And then dad digs his heels in more. And the result is nothing gets done, and there's gridlock and there's conflict. And you know that these neurodivergent kids are picking up on all of that. And it just makes everything worse.
Yeah,
So anything that either of those parents can do to break the gridlock
exactly.
is a good thing. And it might mean saying, okay, I will agree that for the next 30 days, how about we do it your way for the next 30 days?
Right. Give it a try.
And this is the data we're going to track. These are the things we're going to look for. I'm going to keep track of this at my home. You're going to keep track of this at your home. And after 30 days, and we won't even talk about it for 30 days, and then we'll talk about it and we'll see what we can decide. That type of arrangement I have seen work
Yes.
because it breaks the power struggle.
Right. And it acknowledges that you may be conducting your house differently, which doesn't mean it's going to be unsuccessful for the child. So let's try it the way you're suggesting.
And I know that like if you're the mama bear,
Mm.
because in that scenario I'm the mama bear, the idea of not doing something that I think is in my child's best interest is like,
So,
I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it.
oh yeah. So,
But you're not going to get into court or get anything resolved in 30 days.
no, no.
So the best you can do is kind of give up, step back.
Right. Well, and the other thing I tell clients that get into that gridlock, and I'm like, hey, just try it. I tell them, look, if anything for that 30 days, you now have data that shows it doesn't work.
Right.
That's great. And if it does work, that's great too. But either way, it's a win for the child.
The other thing is sometimes I've been in the past 100% certain that something is the right course of action, and I'm not always right because nobody's always right when you have these incredibly complex situations.
No.
There's a million ways that could be right, really. There's a lot of ways that could be sort of right in the middle, like it's just messy.
Oh, it is. I'm constantly asking myself, and sometimes I think this is to my detriment as a parent, but I'm constantly asking myself, is this the hill I need to die on? Is my daughter drinking her milk after her breakfast really worth this fight?
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, sometimes I've lost and gotten into that fight, but
Well, right.
there are moments where I'm able to take a step back and say, no, pivot away from that, do something else, because you're right. There's a million ways to handle things.
The other thing that comes up a lot in these cases are the relationship between the school and the parents. And school supports and IEPs and fires and whether or not we get testing and parent teacher conferences and what's mom saying to the school versus what's dad saying to the school. And oh, dad thinks the whole reason the kid's acting out is because mom left and has a bad boyfriend.
Right. Right.
So how do you recommend families handle that?
So I think letting the school do their testing is a positive thing for the most part. Because you have sometimes that's how they get diagnosed is through the schools.
Right. Right.
Not everybody.
And it's free.
Right. Not everybody utilizes a pediatrician, which is how I went through for my kids. They were younger. So the school doing testing, it helps them buy into the diagnosis as well at the school level. But two, it gives even more data around how it's impacted in the school. And so it's harder for them. With the school, I'm always looking for what can I do to help my child in the school. And usually when they're doing a proper assessment, they're not just asking the parents, they're also asking the teachers who are seeing that child. And they also, depending on the child's age, are doing assessments on the child themselves. And so one parent not giving good data is not going to skew it so much.
No, it is not. It is absolutely not. There's too many ways that it's tested. The other thing is if you get the results back from the school and you don't like them, you have the ability to ask for an independent assessment outside the school and the school pays for it.
Right.
I don't know if parents know this, like learning how to navigate the world of special education is another assignment if you have a neurodivergent child.
It is. It is. And if you have, I don't think also parents know that if you have, when you make those requests, if you don't put them in writing, the school is not held accountable to get them done.
Right.
And so you have to send a formal letter or email that gives it to them in writing because that's what starts the clock. If you verbally ask them, they aren't held to that. So.
Yeah. The other thing is as long as one parent asks, the school has to do the testing. Now, this is a problem that happens again and again and again. If one parent says, no, don't test, and one parent says, yes, do, schools often are at a still point and they will often get their counsel involved. But I've had this happen in a number of cases, and the federal law says a request from a parent. So the school does have to do the assessment. And no parent should, in my opinion, be able to block an assessment.
No. I think
like that might be something that gets put into a parenting plan. If one parent wants to get an assessment, has a thing. This is the protocol. We're going to talk about it, and then you have to sign off on an assessment.
Right, right. You have to participate once the assessing is started. And within the school, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe it's every 3 years they have to do a reassessment.
Yeah,
And
they do.
so not just participating in the initial assessment, but you're
Mhm.
going to participate every time that it's reassessed. I know that they also have annual IEP plans. I've
Mhm.
been in several with my own children and in my previous career and participating in that. But I will say, if you're the non-believing parent, nobody needs your negativity there. Leave it out. You're there to support the child. So leave your drama at the door. You're there for
mean,
the kid.
I have a hard time getting in the mind of that parent. I really do, because all these people are doing is extra work to help your kid.
Right.
I don't know what it looks like because it looks different for every single, it's an individual plan, individualized to your kid, where all these people sit around a table and talk about how can we help your kid. Like, shut up. There's nothing to complain about.
Right. Agreed. It's,
Ridiculous.
yeah.
We have a question from a Modern Divorce Navigator member, a couple of them. This one is, what about situations where your diagnosis comes post-divorce, but is supported after years of speech therapy and OT? That happens all the time, all the time.
Right.
It really doesn't.
So,
The only issue then is that you didn't know about it at the time when you wrote your parenting plan.
right. So I think if there is a chance for a modification, that's when you start putting those things in. I think the biggest thing is, do I have a believing, bought in parent on both sides? Or do I have a doubting Thomas, to use the phrase? If I have that doubting parent, then I want my parenting plan to be as tight as it possibly can be, even if that means a modification, because potentially a child having a diagnosis potentially could meet the criteria for a modification because that's something
Right.
that you didn't have before. And
Right.
so it just depends on the type of parent you're dealing with.
I
Most
really
likely.
think thinking about getting a process in writing that
Mhm.
everybody's accountable to is
Right.
a great way to meet everyone's objections in advance and to avoid having to go back to court a bunch of times.
Agreed.
If one parent thinks that mom runs to every single doctor and doesn't wait long enough, then maybe you come up with a protocol of a time frame, a waiting game, a data gathering.
Right.
I'm going to let the other parent know, then we're going to watch for 30 days, then we'll move forward. So thinking about like what is important to each parent and how do we write it into a process, not a rule, because rules don't work when
No.
kids change every day.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and the other thing that's difficult is autism in particular is it's a spectrum for a reason. You
Mm,
look so different. Even my own two children. I had suspicions of my daughter, but
mhm,
girls are really good at masking.
mhm,
And second, there was part of me that was like, well, but is this behavior that she picked up from watching her brother?
mm,
And I didn't
yeah,
know. And so it took her a little longer to be diagnosed because I just wasn't sure. Her autism tended more towards social and emotional and less outbursts, which is what I was used to. But
right.
most people think of autistic children as the nonverbal, almost developmentally delayed, but they're not. Sometimes they are, but not always. The nonverbal, hands flapping, rocking child. And that's not necessarily the case. You look at both my children, just to physically look at them, you would not know.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other part is, it's unless you are educating yourself as a parent on what does autism look like, and oh my goodness, I'm seeing things, then you're not going to be as open-minded to maybe my child is autistic because they don't look like how we believe it should look.
Yeah. Do you see any downsides in getting the diagnosis for parents who may suspect, like they may know something's off, but everything's mostly fine, grades are good? Do you see any downside in getting the diagnosis?
I honestly, for getting a diagnosis for a child, I honestly don't think it hurts in any diagnosis, not just autism, ADHD, depression, anxiety. Information for a child, when raising a child, information is power because all of a sudden you're unlocking a key. Kids do not come with manuals when they're born. They don't come with those. And so you're unlocking pieces as you get diagnoses that help you understand your child. And I won't lie, they may change as they grow, but you're just unlocking it a little bit more.
Maleah, thank you so much for your time. I know we went over, but I really appreciate it. Appreciate your expertise. And families who have kids with autism, or if you are experiencing autism and you need a family law attorney, Maleah is the one for you. We will make sure that you have her name and number and how to get a hold of her. Thanks, Maleah.
You're welcome. Thank you, Billie.
Thanks so much for listening to the Modern Arizona podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, make sure to download it, like it, leave a review, and share it with your friends. If you know someone who would be a good guest or you would like to be on the Modern Arizona podcast, make sure to give us an email or reach out to us at mymodernlaw.com.